And now we turn to federal policy. In order to make the energy transition succeed, we need well thought out and deliberative policy. So it's my privilege to introduce the first of two speakers who will provide concluding comments about how federal policy can support the energy transition, and specifically potential policies supporting clean hydrogen. We'll start with Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, who represents Texas's 7th Congressional District. She's keenly interested and involved in energy issues, and in the 117th Congress, she serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Representative Fletcher, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to be with you this afternoon. I'm really glad to join you here. I'm up here in Washington, and I'm glad to share my insights on what we see up here from the capital of the United States to the energy capital of the world. And just as I've been glad to visit with Bobby and others who've been working on the strategy that's being shared over this conference, I'm really glad to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing here in Washington and the work that we're doing that's going to help shape the energy future for our country, our community, and our planet. Our energy future is very much on the minds of lawmakers here in Washington and of our neighbors around the country. So it's vital that the energy capital of the country and the energy capital of the world takes the lead in developing sound, forward-looking policy, technology, and leadership. And that's why I'm so glad to be part of this conference and of the work that you all are doing. This conference's focus must be Houston's focus now and into the future. And the good news and the message that I think you've all heard over the last few days is that Houston is well positioned to lead the energy transition to a cleaner, more efficient, more sustainable, and lower carbon world. We must, and we can. When Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm made her first official visit as the Energy Secretary, she came to Houston. And she came to Houston for a reason. And I spent the day with her, and I told her then what I will tell you now, something I hope we all actually already know. Houston has the unique and deep energy expertise, the culture of innovation, and the will to lead our country into our energy future. So I'm talking to y'all from Washington today, and here in Washington, the Congress and the administration are focused on addressing climate change and its impacts with passion and urgency. As my colleagues from the West Coast are experiencing 115-degree temperatures in their homes, and talking to some of them, they don't even have air conditioning. Colleagues from coastal areas are battling sea level rise. There are so many manifestations of climate change before us, and climate change and its impacts are topics of conversation daily. And the conversation is about what to do about it. So the Congress and the administration are focused on doing something, and Houston must be too. And as the Greater Houston Partnership has rolled out in this strategy, doing something can allow Houston to demonstrate our commitment, our collaboration, our creative thinking, and how we solve problems. Now, most experts agree that global demand for energy will continue to grow. So the questions before us are, what are the fuel sources we're going to use? What does the energy mix look like into the future? And importantly, who do we want to produce the energy that we use? Now, in Houston, we know a lot about producing energy, and we also know how to produce energy, cleaner energy on our shores and off our shores. And that is a deep history and expertise that we bring as we talk about what the energy mix looks like going forward. And I think it's a real opportunity for collaboration and creative thinking. And what we're seeing here in Washington is an interest in making investments in technology that will make a difference over time, and also implementing sound policies to get some really big projects like carbon capture and hydrogen, as you mentioned, off the ground and really allow companies to plan for their use in the future. So as the center of energy expertise and experience in the country, Houston isn't only well positioned to lead in the energy transition and chart the course for our energy future, We're also very well positioned to gain from these large investments that we're talking about in Washington. And at least one of them, I'm sure you have heard of now, which is the American Jobs Plan. President Biden has outlined his vision for rebuilding our country's infrastructure in the American Jobs Plan. And Congress is hard at work developing the legislation. In fact, just this morning, the House of Representatives passed the first part of the broader infrastructure plan, the Invest in America Act. And this bill makes transformational investments in our roads, bridges, transit, rail, and wastewater and drinking water infrastructure. It lays the groundwork for our bigger and broader infrastructure goals. The American Jobs Plan is all about creating economic opportunity and creating jobs, investing in American industry in a way that ensures our country continues to lead the world. And in Houston, that means investing in energy. In his blueprint for the American Jobs Plan, President Biden builds on the work that we did in the last Congress to deploy the next generation of energy technology. In the last Congress, we passed several provisions in the Energy Act of 2020, which was included in the year-end appropriations bill that was signed into law. These provisions support critical research and development of technologies we need for our energy future. It included, for example, the Fossil Energy Research and Development Act, legislation I helped lead with my friend from Fort Worth, Congressman Mark Vesey, to expand research and development of large-scale demonstration of carbon capture utilization and storage technology. Investing in carbon capture technology is critical to our future and addressing our environmental challenges. It's also an area where you find a lot of bipartisan agreement. So there's a lot of excitement around carbon capture. And we also included grant funding to continue the important work of modernizing the use of fossil fuels, including reauthorized funding for the Department of Energy's Advanced Research Project Agency of Energy, or ARPA-E, to help advance high potential, high impact technologies in the early stages of development. All these are going to be critical components for building our energy future and making sure that energy producers here in Texas have the resources and support that they need to continue to lead the world when it comes to energy. And these serious federal investments will develop critical technologies that we will rely on in our energy mix into the next century. We see those reflected in the American Jobs Plan. The plan invests in hydrogen demonstration projects with a new production tax credit, supports large-scale sequestration efforts, and reforms and expands the 45Q tax credit for carbon sequestration projects to make it easier to use. It includes $180 billion investments in our nation's R&D capabilities into the technologies of the future, $35 billion of which will be targeted to the full range of solutions needed to achieve technology breakthroughs that address the climate crisis. $15 billion of the $180 billion will be targeted specifically to demonstration for climate R&D projects, including utility scale energy storage, carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, advanced nuclear, rare earth element separations, floating offshore wind, biofuel, bioproducts, quantum computing, and electric vehicles. And additionally, the American Jobs Plan looks to launch another advanced research project agency, this one an ARPA-C for climate, to develop new methods for reducing emissions and building climate resilience, as well as expanding across the board funding for climate research. And there's some really good examples here of how Houston is poised to really take advantage of these projects. Houston's already home to 48 plants that extract hydrogen from natural gas, and it produces more than 1/3 of the United States supply of hydrogen. Experts have concluded that it is important for the US to scale up technologies and bring down costs to enable hydrogen to become more widely used. And we also have a ready-built infrastructure ready to lead in this space. A hydrogen hub requires midstream infrastructure to transport it that hasn't been built out anywhere in the country except in Houston. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we were discussing with Secretary Granholm when she made her visit to Houston. So I think it's a great example of the kind of forward-looking, collaborative, and innovative work that we are doing and can continue to do in Houston in meeting the challenges in front of us. And there are a few other things about the bill that I think are important for y'all to know about in the American Jobs Plan. First is that Congress aims to establish a national climate bank. It's the first of its kind to help cities, states, and communities and companies have a resource to draw from as we move forward. The bank will mobilize public and private investments to provide financing for low and zero emissions technologies, climate resiliency, and building energy efficiency. It will also focus on grid modernization and the delivery and deployment of transmission systems to get power to market. Houston, with its energy expertise, is primed to take advantage of this program. In the last few years, we've seen many promising startups either form or move to Houston for our workforce, expertise, and geographic advantages. Second, Congress is also looking at instituting a nationwide clean electricity standard, CES. And that requires all retail electricity suppliers to obtain 100% of their electricity from clean energy sources by 2050. Now, there are currently 3 different versions of clean energy standards that Congress is considering, and all would have a significant impact on energy markets. 2 of the bills contain provisions for the incorporation of natural gas as a clean fuel under the proposed standard, and one of them is bipartisan. Third, there is a real interest in carbon capture transmission. President Biden has pushed for the build out of infrastructure necessary to transport CO2 from where it's captured to where it can be utilized in manufacturing or safely and securely sequestered in underground storage. My colleague from Fort Worth, Mark Vesey, has introduced the SCALE Act to incentivize this development. The SCALE Act would establish a carbon delivery demonstration center similar to existing carbon capture test centers to support R&D of the midstream and downstream carbon capture sector. It would also provide low cost interest and low interest loans and grants through the Department of Energy for deployment of carbon transportation projects and pipelines, serving in hubs like Houston that will store and process CO2 from multiple carbon capture facilities. The bill would also amend the EPA permitting process for storage wells to provide an expedited process and provide grants to states to get their own permitting departments up and running. So as companies across our region continue to identify more opportunities to advance cleaner energy technology, to lower emissions, and to continue to supply energy to the world, Houston is well positioned to benefit from the vision that's put forward in the American Jobs Plan. And for me, representing the energy capital of the world, there are few more important things I can do in Congress than help lead this conversation about our energy future. Protecting our environment and ensuring that our region and our country continue to lead the world in energy while also reducing emissions, creating sound policy that supports these goals. It's not only good for Houston, it's right for Houston. And as we work to develop sound policy that's guided by data and science and goals that are set out by industry experts, goals that don't change based on the administration, don't change based on who's in Congress, but are policies that we can come together and build a consensus that will allow those in the industry to plan and allow all of us to have confidence that we have a plan going into the future to meet our energy needs and our climate goals. To do that, we need your help. We need your ideas, we need your leadership, and we need you to show that the people who are living and working in Houston are the partners that our neighbors around the country and indeed around the world need. I'm so honored and proud to represent Houston in the United States Congress, and I'm so excited to work together with all of you as we do this important work. I'm delighted to see the introduction and to be a part of the Greater Houston Partnerships Conference today, and excited about so many of the things that we've learned. So I look forward to continuing to work together and to make sure that Houston remains the energy capital of the world.